Hey everyone, what's going on? It's TechTactics here, and today we're going to be looking at how to build a gaming computer. So, if that sounds interesting or helpful to you, definitely stay with me through the intro, and I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, so to build a gaming computer, the number one thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at the best graphics card that you can possibly afford. Now, that does kind of change when you're building a video editing computer, but in this case, to build a gaming computer, the graphics card is going to be the number one most important thing. So, instead of getting a very expensive processor and then a low-end graphics card, you're going to want to get the best graphics card you can. Of course, that doesn't mean going out and buying a 780 or a 980 and then only getting a Celeron. You're going to want to find the right balance. Maybe you can afford the 980 with the Celeron, but instead you should probably go with, say, a 970 and an i3. You know, that's just an example, of course, but you're going to want to find the best graphics card you can while still getting a good CPU. Now, for the CPU, you really don't need any more than 4 cores. Games really aren't using any more than that right now, and you can still get an 8-core AMD that's going to perform pretty well, but my recommendation would be getting a nice i5. That's going to give you probably the most amount of performance possible at this point in time right now, because games don't typically use any more than 4 cores. So an i7 is actually quite unnecessary for just gaming. And that's why I would recommend, keeping a 4690K for only $200. It's going to give you the best amount of performance. Now, what's the next most important thing? So now that we have a decent graphics card and a decent CPU, what do you do next? Well, next would be the RAM. Now, of course, you don't need a huge amount of RAM. In fact, I wouldn't recommend anything more than 16. I'd hardly even recommend 16 at this time. But RAM is cheap and easy enough to get. So if you do want to be ready for the future, then 16 would be fine. However, if you're only planning on playing games right now in this moment, 8 gigs is going to be your choice. 8 gigs is going to be perfectly enough, and you really don't need any more than that. But like I said, 16 would still be a little bit beneficial. So the next important thing is definitely going to be a hard drive. Now, of course, you don't need a huge hard drive, although that's starting to change because a lot of games are starting to be massive download sizes, like as much as 50 or 60 gigs. And that's why I would recommend a minimum of a 1 terabyte. And along with that hard drive, I'd recommend getting a decent 128 or 256 gig SSD for your operating systems and a few other applications here and there. It's going to really speed up your computer overall, and then you'll still have a decent sized hard drive to store all your games. So the next thing that I would recommend, of course this isn't completely necessary, I'd recommend a mechanical keyboard. Now, it doesn't have to be a gaming keyboard. It can be a mechanical keyboard, just mechanical, and it's going to be a lot nicer, and typically you would want a Cherry MX Red switch for gaming. So I definitely recommend that. It's going to give your keyboard a nicer feeling, and it's going to make it so you can click a lot faster, it's going to last a lot longer, and of course you can choose from any one you want, but for just gaming, I'd recommend the reds and maybe the brown, but probably not the blue, because blue is typically geared towards typing and not so much for gaming. So finally, the thing that you gotta look at for a gaming computer is going to be your cooling. You're gonna want pretty good cooling for both your CPU and your GPU, as you're probably gonna want to overclock them as much as possible so you can get the highest performance as possible. So when I say as good cooling as possible, I mean throwing in some fans, however many 140s you can fit, maybe some 120s, and getting a better heatsink for your CPU, maybe even a closed loop liquid cooler. So basically, you're going to want a high-end GPU with a decent CPU. There's no need to go for a very expensive one. In fact, I would not recommend anything better than an i5. Of course, you can get better if you have the money, but it's not really going to give you an increase in performance at all. And then you're going to want the highest-end GPU you can afford. Really, there's no limit. The only thing I would limit you on the GPU, I would say don't go for 4x SLI, because the fourth card is essentially going to do really nothing. I've seen benchmarks where it even actually decreases the FPS a little bit. So I wouldn't recommend a fourth GPU. I'd say 3 at most, 2 for optimal performance. But of course, get the best single GPU you can afford, and then later on worry about getting the second one. Don't get 2 cheap ones, because even though that will outperform one high-end one, you're gonna have more driver issues, and cooling's gonna be more of an issue and things like that. So get the best single graphics card you can afford, and then later on, or even if you have extra money, throw in the second one. And then RAM is going to be pretty important. Like I said, 8 gigs is going to be good. 16 would probably be recommended though. So some things that you probably shouldn't do for a gaming computer, I wouldn't recommend X99 because that's essentially just going to give you higher end CPUs and faster RAM. And the RAM speeds aren't really going to matter at all. And the extra cores are not going to help at all either, because like I said before, games can only use up to about 4 cores. Now, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, you're going to be perfectly fine with an i5, and the other CPUs really aren't going to give you any sort of increase in performance. So, that's about it for this video. If you guys have any questions on how to build a gaming computer, leave them in the comment section below, and I will answer them as best I can and as soon as possible. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, and definitely go ahead and subscribe for all the other videos that I have coming out very soon. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time, and peace. Hey, what's going on, YouTube? It's TechTactics here, and today we're going to be comparing the 120mm fan to a 140mm fan to this giant 200mm fan.